meeting's now live.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the Health and Wellbeing Board. I'm Dr. Linda Colley, Chief Clinical Officer for Portsmouth CCG, and I'm chairing the meeting today. We are meeting virtually in response to the limitation placed on governance by the COVID-19 pandemic. Until recently, the law stated that all members had to be present in the room to make formal decisions at meetings. However, the law was amended in response to the COVID-19 emergency, and councils are able to hold public meetings virtually. This will be in accordance with the Local Authorities Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority Meeting Regulations 2020 number 392. Members of the public are invited to view this meeting, and there has been the opportunity for written representations to be submitted. Board members are requested to keep their microphones on mute and only turn these on when they are called to speak. If you are to use the chat function, it's only to use that to indicate that you wish to make a comment, and I will call upon you as such. If possible, please use the raise your hand function, which is just on the top of the screen next to the chat box. So I'm just going to go round to make sure that everyone who is due to take part is here today. So we start with Councillor Winnington.
Councillor Matthew Winnington, Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing and Social Care for Portsmouth City Council and co-chair of the board.
Welcome. Councillor Vernon Jackson. Councillor Horton.
Good morning, Councillor Susie Horton, Cabinet Member for Children, Families and Education.
Councillor Atkins. Councillor Smythe. Councillor Smith.
Councillor Jeanette Smith, present. Thank you.
Councillor Hunt.
Good morning, everybody. I'm definitely here.
Thank you. Innes Richards. Diane Sherlock. Nick Moore. Susanna Rosenberg.
Yes, I'm here for Solent, Chief Operating Officer. Apologies, Chair. I have to go to an urgent meeting at 11.
Lovely, thank you. Alison Jeffrey.
Yes, I'm here. Alison Jeffrey, Director, Children, Families and Education for the City Council.
Jackie Powell.
Morning, Jackie Powell from Portsmouth Clinical Commissioning Group, a lay member.
Stephen Labitz. Superintendent Claire Jenkins.
Morning, everybody. Yeah, here from Hampshire Police.
Jacqueline Markey.
Hi, yes, Jacqueline Markey from Hampshire Land White CRC. Apologies, I will need to leave at 11:30 today.
Roger Batterbury.
Hello, yes, Roger Batterbury, Chair at Health Watch Portsmouth.
Gordon Blunn. Mark Cubban. No. Penny Emmerett. Andy Weeks.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, Andy Weeks, Hampshire Farm Rescue Service.
Helen Atkinson.
Morning, Helen Atkinson. I'm here. I'm Director of Public Health for Portsmouth.
David Williams.
Morning, everybody. David Williams, Chief Executive of the City Council and a board member of the Portsmouth CCG.
Dominic Latouze.
Dominique Latouze, Consultant in Public Health for Portsmouth City Council.
Kelly Nash.
Kelly Nash from the Strategy Unit at the City Council.
Frances Mullen.
Good morning, everybody. So Frances Mullen, Deputy Principal at Portsmouth College.
Julia Catherine.
Good morning, Julia Catherine. I'm Head of Inclusion at the City Council and Strategic Lead for SEND.
Lisa Willis.
Good morning. I'm Lisa, and I am also with the strategy team, and I'm here to present today.
Lovely, thank you. And I see Penny's joined. Penny, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Linda. So apologies for being late. I'm Penny Emmerich. I'm Deputy Chief Exec at Portsmouth Hospitals.
Lovely. Anna Martin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
Lovely. And did you have any formal apologies sent?
Yes, I did. I've got Dr. Nick Moore, Mark Cubban, who's represented by Penny Emmerich, Sarah Beattie of the Probation Service, Councillor Matthew Atkins, and Diane Sherlock of Age UK. Diane would like to pass on a message to the board.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Right. Diane Sherlock, Age UK, has requested this message is conveyed to the board. A very heartfelt thank you to PCC-CCG's acknowledgement and understanding of the voluntary sector, who are currently being contacted by Adult Social Care to book COVID vaccinations for charity staff workers. This is an outstanding offer being gratefully taken up by the voluntary sector of Portsmouth. I have never looked forward to a vaccination so much. Another thank you is for enabling voluntary sector access to quality training opportunities, such as Making Every Contact Count and Connect 5, as well as safeguarding training shared recently, all of which is being investigated and attended as I write. The sector is grateful for these opportunities, which are not lost on us. Thank you to this board for caring and sharing. And there's also, I've just had a message from Gordon Blunn. I think he's trying to join but can't get in, so I'll see if I can send him the invitation again.
Lovely, thank you, Anna. Any declarations of interest for the items on the agenda today? No. So we'll just look through the minutes of the previous meeting, which was chaired by Councillor Winnington in November. So if we go through for accuracies, first of all, so page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6. Was everyone satisfied that they were an accurate representation of the meeting? Do I have a proposer for approval of the minutes?
Proposed.
Lovely. Can I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Oh, that was a joint seconded. I definitely heard Roger's voice there, so thank you. The recommendation has been proposed and seconded. I will now take the vote by affirmation of the meeting as permitted within the regulations. If there is no dissent, the proposal is passed. Are there any objectives to this recommendation? No, lovely, thank you. So the minutes of the previous meeting have therefore been approved. Matters arising. I think there was one about physical activity strategy. Dominic?
Thank you. Yeah, I promised to give an update to the board on the physical activity strategy. So Energise Me, who's our partner who's conducting the strategy for the whole of Hampshire and Isle of Wight, are in the process of consulting on the new physical activity strategy. They've got workshops starting on the 8th of February next week, ahead of a planned launch date of early April. Unfortunately, given current circumstances, some of the consultations and the workshops have been delayed due to lockdown because they physically can't meet people, and obviously due to staff pressures as well, given with sickness and so on. So a number of organisations and people haven't been engaged with, which might delay the launch in April, but it would be my intention, all things being well, that I will give another update at the next meeting on the as a written paper on the Health and Wellbeing Board, to the Health and Wellbeing Board later in the spring when that launch is underway.
Lovely, thank you. Any comments about that? No. Lovely. So I apologise because I'm going to reorganise the agenda, but we're going to do the community safety plan first, if that's okay. So if we hand over to Lisa and Councillor Hunt for that.
Great, thank you very much, Chair. I also need to lead the meeting at 11, which is, and thank you very much for letting us go early. I think we've been allocated 15 to 20 minutes, so I'm going to talk for 5 minutes or so about the plan, and then I'm going to hand over to Councillor Hunt to talk about some of the things the Council's doing to address these priorities, which will hopefully leave some time for questions. So this is a strategic planning document. There are operational plans and activities that sit beneath this, but this document focuses in on the long-term underlying drivers for crime in the city and is based on the findings of the strategic assessment that the board approved in September last year, which also incorporates the findings from our community consultation carried out this time last year with a representative sample of Portsmouth residents. So producing a community safety plan is a statutory requirement for a local authority area, and this is the first plan that's been presented to the Health and Wellbeing Board since it took on the responsibilities of the Community Safety Partnership in June 2019. And the name of the plan has slightly changed, so it used to be known as the Safer Portsmouth Partnership Plan, and we've decided to suggested calling it the Community Safety Plan for Portsmouth to reflect that change. So as I've said, the plan is based on data from the strategic assessment for 2019-20, but we do a quick check on the provisional crime data before publishing the plan to make sure we're not missing any new trends or issues. And of course, we consult with our police colleagues regularly. The latest provisional data we have from the Home Office's iQuanta website, which runs from April to November 2020, shows overall crime is down in the city compared to last year by about 11%, which is likely to be connected to the dip in crime recorded in April and May last year as a result of the first lockdown. But there are different patterns for different crime types. So, for example, reported antisocial behaviour, public order, possession and supply of drugs, these crimes didn't see a dip during the first lockdown, and actually there's the violence against the person offences peaked, I think, in July, which is now sort of stabilised a bit. I won't give you any more figures at the moment, but there's plenty more detail in the Appendix 2, and of course the full strategic assessment is available on the website and it's referenced in the document, so you can go there if you want more. The plan is very different also to previous plans because Portsmouth's approach to community safety has evolved over the years and is now much more mainstream. So community safety activity runs through the day-to-day council services in housing and communities, public health, regulatory services, and families. And relationships between partners have been built, continue to be built across the city. So, for example, in response to increases in most serious violence over the last few years, a virtual crime reduction unit was established last year, working with the Police and Crime Commissioner and based in Children's Services. It was agreed locally that these new resources would be used to boost existing early intervention, like family group conferencing, and also to support some targeted work, like the Trusted Adult Programme, for example, where vulnerable young people are supported on a one-to-one basis to prevent them entering the criminal justice system and perhaps going on to commit more serious violence. Police colleagues are also rolling out a training programme on the impact of early trauma and also developing a youth reference group that will consult with young people on an ongoing basis to understand what it is they need to stay out of trouble. And we're also developing a youth strategy across the city. I think Councillor Hunt might talk a bit more about that and the Building Safer Communities Fund later on. So there's a big focus on early intervention with young people across the city and partners. The plan reflects this mainstream approach by pulling together existing multi-agency plans like the domestic abuse strategy and the violence reduction strategy, rather than duplicating effort and maximising the coordination of our collective resources. Whilst the pandemic has thrown up some particular operational problems and issues for colleagues, generally the community safety analysts don't anticipate this will result in changes to the priorities identified. However, this is only an interim plan for 12 months, as things are so unusual at the moment, and further research and analysis will be fed into the development of the health and wellbeing strategy later in the year. One very positive outcome of the lockdown restrictions, and another example of mainstream services working so well together, was the partnership work undertaken to bring homeless people into hotel accommodation and managing the increased levels of antisocial behaviour that did arise at some times in the area. Many of these people have had long-term problems with drug and alcohol misuse, but have actually successfully been helped into self-contained supported tenancies since then. And the public health team have also been working with mental health services to successfully bid for nearly £800,000 of central government grants to develop new support services for homeless people with multiple problems. And on the back of that work, we've recently submitted an expression of interest to the Ministry of Communities, Housing and Local Government for their Changing Futures programme. And if that's successful, that could bring in up to 1.5 million over the next 2 years to further improve the coordination of these services, misuse, mental health and homelessness services. So the plan explains that the priorities are similar to previous years, and it's because they're complex, often intergenerational societal issues that are interrelated and that there are no easy answers for. So despite maintaining a focus on these themes for many years, the evidence is still there to continue that focus. And the Venn diagram on page 11 we update every year, which shows how the themes are linked together. There's a lot of detail in that on that page, which you can look at later. But if you think about substance misuse, for example, if we reduce the demand for drugs by getting more people into treatment, this might help to reduce the number of county lines active in the area, and by extension, the number of vulnerable young people being drawn into drug dealing and drug taking. In the Venn diagram, we identify reoffending, although there's no separate priority in the plan for reoffending, for reducing reoffending. We know that the work we will do to address domestic abuse, drug and alcohol misuse is very likely to contribute to a reduction in reoffending. And the early intervention with families, vulnerable young people and young offenders will also obviously help to prevent offending in the first place. So the report recommends board members approve the plan and asks partners around the table to take it back to their own individual organisations for endorsement. Subject to the approval of the board today, the plan is for the council to endorse this plan on the 16th of March. And that's all I have. So I'm going to hand over to Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Lisa. And just so you all know, I've got a bit of a toothy grin. I grin a lot, but I've got a toothy grin because when I was younger, I used to get involved in set twos in the police, and I had my teeth knocked out and had to have some reconstructive surgery, and one of them is the front tooth. So, and it's come out and it hurts a little bit. So it's tough on me, but there you are. Anyway, it's just one of those things. So good morning, everybody. Thank you, Lisa, and I hope everyone will join me in thanking Lisa and her team for the tremendous effort in bringing this report together to show how we must all work together in a strategic way to combat crime, especially violent crime, focusing on domestic abuse, serious violence and knife-enabled crime and drugs misuse. And at the council, and I'm sure all of you too, we believe that the early identification of children and young people at risk of exploitation or abuse is key to breaking the cycle of crime and violence. And Lisa has touched on that when she opened up there. And that all of us working together to intervene and support children and young people at an early stage will help prevent adverse childhood experiences, which we all know then leads to this cycle of domestic abuse, drugs, misuse and violent crime. And it's well known that children and young people who witness or suffer domestic abuse will go on to repeat that behaviour in many cases. This detailed report presented to you today, researched over many months, written by our skilled team of experienced officers, demonstrates the extent to which, as Lisa says, community safety awareness and activity now runs through mainstream services. As I mentioned just now, all of us have a statutory duty now to work together to reduce crime, antisocial behaviour and reoffending. And so recently I wrote to all our services across the council reminding them of that duty. So in the same flavour, as it were, I look forward to meeting you all in the surroundings of your own organisations, either there when all this pandemic is over, soon I hope, or later, or virtually online, to find out how you have used this report to encourage a collaborative leadership approach to tackle these priorities. My role in the council is clear. It is not a specific portfolio, but it has an overreaching role to make sure that crime and serious violent crime and all the things that we've just mentioned is addressed through strategies. And Lisa very often kind of reminds me that what we must understand today is that responsible authorities are required to produce this detailed work to identify local priorities, which she and I have talked about already, and then all of us to develop strategies to address them. And we have to do this against a background of reductions in funding for all the services we represent. And in the case of Portsmouth City Council, that funding has been cut almost in half. And all of you will have lamented cuts in your areas. But it can be done, and it is being done. And Lisa touched on the homeless example just now. And even in the face of these cuts, one of the most vulnerable groups in our city, our homeless community, are now being supported back into mainstream living by partnership working across the city and the voluntary services and yourselves to help free them from the exploitation, including drugs, misuse and violence. And we have invested millions of pounds to buy properties to provide that personal accommodation mentioned by Lisa just now, and to support them. Now, as a cabinet, we weren't prepared just to rehouse them for a time being or to get them off the street and just put them somewhere. We knew we took the decision that it was important to support them subsequently to get them back into mainstream living. And this has a beneficial societal, this approach has a beneficial societal impact, as residency now see fewer and fewer people living on our streets. And those people are not attacked, and we have the opportunity to get them off drugs and say back into mainstream living. I stressed earlier how we believe early intervention is key to reducing violent crime and these local priorities. And this report, the evidence gathered through the Community Safety Survey and our citywide Building Safer Community consultations, where the community safety team and we've been very busy, like yourselves, visited community groups and held meetings in Drayton, Paulsgrove, Portsea, Southsea, Buckland, Milton, Eastney and Somers Town. And the public support this approach. We know that from talking to them over and over again, wanting more and better things for young people to do. So again, we believe that continuing to invest in our adventure playgrounds and youth clubs and spending £500,000 commissioning active community network and motivate and investing in sports is a good thing to do. On the raw policing and enforcement and so on, we believe that investing in community wardens and the city's safeguarding cameras are other examples of how we work cross services and with partners to help us tackle all of our local priorities. We know that domestic abuse continues to be the most common driver of assaults. It is written in the report and it is evidence. So we are pleased to work with the Office of the Police Crime Commissioner to commission services to address these issues. It's really important too, because many of you will know about the work that's being done more and more with perpetrators, because we know there are co-abusive relationships where people are hurt one another all of the time, and these often end in tragedy. So Alison, that sits in Alison's area, and that is something that is happening more and more. But we also know it's very sad that the risk of children at risk of exploitation has doubled over the last couple of years. So again, recently, we supported the Office of the Police Crime Commission to raise extra funds to better tackle modern day slavery and child grooming online. And we also supported the Chief Constable's bid for extra funds to go after 300 more career criminals, employing 7 more officers in the organised crime unit to help tackle county lines, and fast track newly recruited officers into our neighbourhoods to go after the criminals blighting our local communities. So the hard work of Lisa and her team is there before you. The City Council has taken up the challenge to work in partnership and cross services and cross portfolio. And I know Claire Jenkins is here, and I've met her a couple of times recently to talk through how we are doing these things to better tackle violent crime, knife-enabled crime, drugs misuse and domestic violence And as I say, we're very keen to see early intervention. One thing I do think we all need to do much more about, and that is alcohol and how we use it in our city. Oh, never a good thing to do this because you can't focus on it. But this report from back when Norman Baker was a minister, some time ago now, within it says Portsmouth identified products found at the scene of violent crimes, domestic abuse and alcohol-related disorder, all of which had an ABV of 6.5% or higher. And Portsmouth's work with homeless, even back then, and the Homeless Charity Centre Point also identified that homeless people are more likely to drink alcohol from plastic bottles and cans due to risk of glass packaging, etc. So we have a lot of work to do. A lot of work is being done, but I firmly believe, and I've not really been able to get much traction on it, that we need to do more around alcohol and how it's consumed, how it's used, because the nighttime economy will be coming back in due course, and we will see those crimes related to the nighttime economy happening again. And lastly, if Claire's around, although on-street violent, very serious violent crime isn't all that common, she will be able to tell you that over a recent weekend, and she explained to me that police were stretched to their limit because of knife-related crime, other very serious assaults over a weekend in the city, as well as dealing with the COVID issues. So a lot is being done. We're putting money into sports halls, as I say. Soon we'll be investing in sports pitches. We'll continue to invest in things for youngsters to do, and we can all work together in order to bear down on violent crime and the things we've mentioned before. I think that's about it.
Lovely,
thank you very much indeed for listening.
Thank you. That's generated quite a bit of interest. But if we go to Claire first, so she can come back about the comments, and then we'll move on to the others who've raised their hands.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I guess, yes, just broadly, I'd like to start by saying completely supportive of everything that's gone into the report, both in terms of that scanning process that's taken place to inform the report and the recommendations and actions that we know we want to work on over the next certainly 12 to 24 months is the plan that I'm looking at in terms of my policing plan, which links very much in with the community safety plan. I'd echo everything that's been said about hidden harm in particular, and of course through COVID, that's even more worrying for all of us in terms of what's being stored up. And a bit anecdotally, really, when I look at my top 10 suspects across the city for all crime types, if I look at just my police records, they have all followed the same journey, and that journey is that they started off by being witness to domestic abuse. They then go on to become missing from home. From missing, they start to become involved in antisocial behaviour, and then onwards from that is potential for criminality of a more serious nature. And all of them follow that same path. So going back to everything that's been articulated around the trauma-informed approach that we should take to all of our services, acknowledging how adverse childhood experiences can then go on to affect outcomes in life, obviously not just from a crime aspect, but particularly health and well-being. And how I do feel really confident that in the city, our staff are being trained in this. We are looking at what's happened to an individual when we're coming into contact with them and not what's wrong with them. And from that, we are then using that information to try and inform effective early intervention and prevention services, and everything that Councillor Hunt's referenced around improved sporting facilities, open spaces, and ability for young people to engage with some trusted adults is absolutely where we need to be. So, yeah, just really supportive of everything. Domestic abuse wise, between us all, we've had numerous initiatives that are ongoing. The Is This Love campaign in the city, Ask Annie, which is a national campaign running out of pharmacies, and Hampshire Police's Safe at Home, where we've reached out to people at supermarkets in particular, knowing that that might be one of the few times that they've been able to escape potentially controlling coercive environments. So Yeah, lots to do, as has been really well articulated in the plan, but quite excited about the opportunity that we've got to work together to achieve that within the city. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
I think you find Susie Horton was first. So do you want
Councillor Horton? Sorry, it's hard to tell with the hands sometimes.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. A very interesting discussion. We probably could talk about this for ages, but I just want to drill down a little bit on what Councillor Hunt was saying around the youth provision. So most people probably know that actually in terms of what we do within the council, it crosses several portfolios. So it's a lot of activity goes on in housing, but also it crosses over with culture and leisure, children and families, obviously, and Lee Hunt, Councillor Hunt's portfolio as well as obviously the money that we use as well around the Hampshire Violence Reduction Unit. So within the council, there's a kind of cross-portfolio kind of focus, as well as obviously working with our partners outside it. And all I wanted to say really was that what we're working on at the moment is a kind of mapping of the efficiency of that, because we've all really got the same end in sight, and it's just about to make sure that in these sort of cash strapped times that we're actually using that money and also those services in a complementary way, and actually just ensuring that the child is in the centre of this, and whatever we can do to support them that we do. I think what Claire Jenkins has just said really made the hairs on my arms stand up. You know, this whole start with trauma is just so significant, and we need to make sure that we get in there as early as possible in order to give these young people other choices in life. So yeah, I just wanted to emphasise the stuff around the youth provision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you. Lisa and I go back a long way, so this is not a criticism of the report, and I think it's a very good report, but my concern is the fallout from COVID is going to be massive, and how does that alter early intervention? Because, you know, the first one says reduce school absence and exclusion. Well, they're not in school, so do you see the plan changing? And I appreciate you've said it's for 12 months, but do you see the plan changing to account for the fallout from COVID, whether it's alcohol intake, truancy from schools, and will crime go up because of COVID? I know that's a hard question, but sorry about that.
That's all right. I did mention in what I was saying in the short term, clearly there are responses that we need to coordinate around the impact of COVID. Children not being in school is one of them, and I know that there's an awful lot of work, and in fact new roles have been created to support that and to help that process within children's services. But in the long term, things are likely to return to normal, but that's why we've only done a 12-month plan, really, is because actually we need to be able to pick up any significant changes, long-term changes, and incorporate those into our response. So, I mean, that's a very, it's a very general response, Jeanette, but that's all I have at the moment, because things change all the time, and we've acknowledged that there may well be an impact, but not sure if it's going to be. I'm not sure that it will change the fact that we need to focus on domestic violence, substance misuse, and early intervention, for example.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It wasn't a trick question, Lisa.
No, that's okay.
So, Councillor Hunt, were you going to come back into one of those comments?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Smith. I think what this is doing, and what Lisa and I wanted to, I hope to get across today, was, and we're all doing it anyway, we all know it's the only way to survive, as it were, is to work together, and the duty that's placed upon us to do that. And of course, people will go away and develop their own strategies within their own organisations, and then come back, I hope, to the Health and Wellbeing Board and report what those strategies are and how it's intended that they will help us address those local priorities.
Thank you. Jackie, I think you were next.
thank you, and thank you also for the report that I found incredibly helpful and informative, and I'd echo pretty much everything that's already been said. Me being me, I latched onto some money somewhere and I heard 1.5 million. So how much are we dependent on that to deliver this strategy in the areas that you would like, particularly substance misuse, which has had a bit of a struggle in terms of funding over the years? And people, however, the number of missing reports for young people's in the carers in the caring system has not reduced, and that seems to me really sad actually, and a problem. That's it.
So who's coming? Oh, Lisa, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm happy to respond to the money thing. I think actually I said 1.5 million, not 5 million. But anyway, that money is that's our public health team that have pulled that money into the city. So for the foreseeable future, we will be developing those services using that external money. One of the things that we need to do with the Changing Futures programme is actually achieve some long-term system change. So we're hoping that that's something that's going to really help us to deliver within our existing budgets and deliver differently. So that's the side on the money side. I don't know if, on the missing side, I'm not sure if Alison maybe wants to have a comment about that.
I'm very happy, Chair, to come in now, but equally, if somebody else wants to go forward. I mean, just on the point about missing, obviously, what I'd say is we work really, really closely with our police colleagues and others to support looked after children who are going missing. We actually have very few who repeatedly go missing, so you have to pore over the data to sort of fully understand this. But obviously we do have a very real threat from county lines in the city, and a few of our looked after children are caught up in that, and we have to work really, really hard to try and counter that, and the disruption activity that the police have done recently is really valuable on that. I put my hand up to say we are, I believe, working really closely together in Portsmouth, and we have good partnerships. We also, in addition to the activities that have been referenced in relation to early intervention, we have a fairly strong targeted early help service that works on a one-to-one basis with families in family homes, working with them on behaviour change. I have to say, however, that it's still really, really difficult to think about how we could increase that at the time of continuing pressure into our social care system, and the proportion of the budget that we've been able to spend on early help as opposed to statutory reactive social care has remained pretty much the same since 2016. It was increased in the middle of 2016, but has remained the same since. So while I think this is absolutely the right set of priorities, and we're doing everything that we can, I don't think we can be complacent about the extent to which we can lean into early intervention in Portsmouth. And I think we also have to be really careful about thinking about the likely pressures from COVID and the economic impact of that, and the increased needs that families are going to have as a result of that. So it is difficult not to be a little bit pessimistic looking forward. That said, all we can do is work really, really closely together. And my last point would be that actually not just early intervention, but our whole approach to special educational needs and disability that Julia is going to talk about later is really relevant to this agenda as well. We know that many of our young offenders have long-standing communications difficulties and the identification of those and the effective response of those in the school system, which the SEND strategy is designed in part to tackle, is really important. So, I think the good news is we're working really closely together. We just have to not be complacent about this. It's an ongoing challenge.
Lovely. Councillor Hunt, did you want to come back in about any of that? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you for reminding me there, Alison. I think something I want to say is a lot of what we do around money is not the statutory provision, but we have to, for example, community wardens, we have to either bid for this money or it's from the local taxation. So a lot of what we continue to do, and we're very lucky here, we're better than some other places. I think in Hampshire, they have no youth services at all now. I think that's right, isn't it, Alison?
Well, we benefit from the housing-based services, which are fantastic.
Indeed, absolutely. And so we draw on the housing revenue account a lot to help these priorities, and Councillor Sanders has been very good about that. We all know that. But and something that Jacqueline talked about now is this constant having to bid for money. So you're never ever certain that somebody that you employ is still going to be there in a year or two, and that's very miserable, and it's not helpful at all. But we've got good skill sets amongst our officers, and we've got officers who know how to bid for money, and we've been hugely successful in doing that. We saw 6 million come in around homelessness. We saw £2 million around providing sports facilities recently, and other monies that Lisa has just mentioned. And there was something on the tip of my tongue through the gap of my tooth that I wanted to mention, but it's gone. But so we do that. We do really very well indeed, as some of you have just said. That's about it, really.
You're on mute, Linda.
Oh. Roger, then David. Sorry, we're all doing it today. Roger, then David,
Right.
please.
Thank you, Linda. I wondered whether you were saying my name. I was trying to read your lips. I'd just like to say it was a really helpful and informative report, and the discussions and comments have been good, especially liked Councillor Hunt's comments about the short-termism in contracts and staffing. I think that's a difficult situation. On behalf of Healthwatch Portsmouth, I just wanted to get in quickly with a comment. I noticed that there's 2 retendering opportunities in priority A and B, and just wanted to say that obviously hope that's a consultation process involving the public. So more of a comment than a question. Thank you.
Thank you. David.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. Yeah, it might be a subject for a future meeting, but I think certainly in terms of picking up Councillor Smith's point about the impact of COVID, I mean, clearly we need to be tracking and trying to anticipate where we might get disproportionate changes of impact. But the other thing I wanted to pick up, and it may relate to this, it's something we need to look at. We know that children and young people are the most blighted through the COVID pandemic and will be for the longest period of time. I also note from Appendix 1 that there's a plus 20% increase in first-time entrants to the youth service system. I know that was probably largely from pre-COVID data. But we also seem to have a reduction, I think it's a 28% reduction in Appendix 2, where there's no substantive outcome. Now, I don't pretend to know exactly what a no substantive outcome means, but I do think that maybe for a future meeting, it would be good to try to unpack that issue about first-time entrants, because I'm sure it's a multi-agency issue. And it may also impact on agencies that aren't always represented at this forum, but we could prep for that. But I think that both the issue around COVID, whatever new and similarly what on earth can we do to avoid that double blight of COVID and entry to the youth justice system for as many of our young people as we possibly can. So a couple of items possibly for the future that may be linked. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Alison, did you want to come back in?
Just briefly, yes. Firstly, to say, actually, in response to what David's just said, the number of first-time entrants is a subject which is receiving a lot of scrutiny and discussion in our Youth Offending Board, which Claire chairs, and also on a pan-Hampshire basis. It's a key priority for us to discuss in relation to the impact of trauma, but also we're really interested in Portsmouth in making sure that we've got consistency in the application of sanctions and that we're not inadvertently pushing young people into the criminal justice system in a way that is in itself criminogenic. But the second point that I wanted to make was around domestic violence, which Claire identified as lying at the heart of so many of the top 10 that she's looking at. And we have had previous discussion in this board about the fragmented and short-term nature of funding to address domestic violence. And I think we've still got an ongoing piece of business really in terms of our health and care integration and how we make sure that the support for reducing domestic violence and addressing it when it occurs is really secure in our service landscape. So I think I'd like to sort of flag that we need to come back to that when we're looking at how we allocate resources across health and social care in Portsmouth.
Yep. Okay, thank you. So the recommendations that we've been given is that we should, whether the Health and Wellbeing Board approve the plan and that we take back to our own organisations to make sure that we've got the collaborative leadership approach. Are we all happy to do that? I mean, clearly this is a topic that's going to come back, isn't it, with lots more discussion to be had, I think. So, lovely, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Hunt and Lisa, for that.
Can I go off to the dentist now, please?
Yes, yes, of
Thank
course.
you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.
And I believe Gordon has made it onto the call, so welcome, Gordon.
Hello there, everybody.
So we'll move on to Local Outbreak Engagement Board paper, please.
Dr. Colley, I'll just present that one. So this is the regular update that comes to the board and it summarises the work of the Local Outbreak Engagement Board, which was set up locally to oversee the pandemic response. I'll be very brief as an update because lots of other members of the board are part of the Local Outbreak Engagement Board and will probably want to contribute, so just an overview. Obviously the work continues, the board continues to meet on a monthly basis. And the key businesses included looking at the local data and intelligence, understanding changes to regulations and powers in relation to pandemic response, and receiving regular reports giving updates on the testing programme, the contact tracing programme, and more recently the vaccination programme. The business of the boards is generally also brought together in a summary assurance report, and this time, because it's still a time in most recent appendix to the covering one, so you'll see the kind of information that's being received. The risks identified at the last meeting were obviously the new variant and also the high local infection rates, particularly following the Christmas period. So it's been a really positive, I think, meeting. So lots of challenge to it, lots of opportunities to reflect on how the wider community are receiving some of the response. I think also a really good opportunity just to feed back some experience into the kind of planning process. Probably what I want to say as introduction, as I say, other members of are on this board as well and will probably have things they want to contribute, but it just comes to his report, so you have assurance that the process is taking place. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or any questions? Councillor Willington.
Thanks, Kelly, for that introduction. I'll just, not much to add really, just to say, as the chair of the Outbreak Engagement Board, just thanks to everyone who's been involved with that. I think one of the indicative things about what happens at the outbreak engagement boards is that there are questions which are very pertinent and very helpful, but actually on a lot of the ones that we get updates on every time, there isn't that many questions, not because we don't have questions, but because they're answered before we even get there. Because the reports are very, very thorough. They're very well thought through. They really show the professionalism of all of the teams in both in the council and with all the other partners across the city who are working together so well. So I'd really like to thank everyone who gets involved in the board meetings from all of our partners right across the city, because it really does show that without that partnership, well, we wouldn't be anywhere near as good in providing for the people of the city as we have been, and we always know that we need to keep that up as well, because if we let that slip, then we're letting the people of the city down. So just thank you again for the support we get from the officers, particularly Kelly in running the board, but everyone who gets involved and everyone who is making a difference during the pandemic in the city. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? No, so that one was just for noting. Thank you. David, can I hand over to you to do the next one, the integrated care system new model?
Yes, certainly, Linda. Item 5 we're on now, and this is a paper that reports back to you on a consultation response that we submitted just after Christmas, following an NHS consultation on the next steps for integrated care. And this is, whilst the emphasis is on the integrated care system, and for us in Portsmouth, the integrated care system for us covers Portsmouth, Southampton, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, so that's a population of about 2 million. That sounds quite big and quite remote, but the changes really projected within the consultation paper are actually, I think, very significant and impact directly on the relationship between the work that we do at a locality through this board and that bigger geography, and most particularly in terms of the future of the CCG and whether in fact we have a CCG for Portsmouth, or whether all of that, as is anticipated in the paper, is amalgamated into a single arrangement for the integrated care system geography. So it's for that reason really that we bring this to you, and it's for that reason that we work very hard to try to get a substantive response to the consultation during what was a pretty tricky period actually over Christmas and into the first week of the new year. So there's a lot in the consultation paper to welcome. There's a huge amount that's unanswered, and we shall see what the response to the consultation is. But if you have taken the opportunity to look at the questions that were asked in the consultation, you'll see that there was a fairly heavy hint as to what the answer should be. We didn't always follow that route, but what we did want to do was reflect on your behalf the really strong belief and philosophy that we've built up over the years in terms of health and care across Portsmouth, our desire to see deeper integration across our services, our desire to see the wider determinants of health addressed and get the balance of that right. So in terms of a précis of our response, support for the general principles set out in the document, particularly the principle of subsidiarity, and you'll know where I'm coming from with that, and the recognition of the importance of place-based working, and we do raise some issues in our response about whether or not the nuance of the and the detail that's required to get place-based working properly effective is fully appreciated. We also reflected the commitment from Health and Care Portsmouth to engage fully at all levels in terms of systems. The consultation paper has a sort of a bit of a broad brush approach to describing systems. There are many levels, many layers at which we need to operate, and we have always looked to play a full role in that, whether that's within the city, whether that's at the level of the hospital catchment, which is clearly really important, which is currently our integrated care partnership geography, and also at the ICS, the bigger geography, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. We also expressed our willingness to share our own experience. We've learned a lot through our journey, and we know there's also a lot to learn from others, and I think that we could see a bit more structure around how that learning is shared, because there are some very good examples of locality working going on in other parts of the country. The support for the importance of place, which is described in the paper as aligning to local authority geographies. But of course, just looking across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, the scale of those local authority geographies is quite different from one part to another. And finally, the importance of understanding local populations at a fine grain, and also the interplay of the multitude of different agencies, including the voluntary community sector, in terms of designing appropriate services to meet the specific needs of our communities. So we also, it's all very boring, but we do highlight issues around governance, because as they say, the rules maketh the game. And I think it's, it is important that we put our markers down now and we try to influence the debate. There's a lot said about devolution and delegation of budgets to a local area. We really need to see how that is going to work and how that's going to that's going to happen in reality, because there are also issues around the democratic accountability of these structures as well, and how the democratic voice is reflected, as well as the important input at different tiers of the systems that are in place. So I'm terribly sorry that we weren't able to share the submission with you before we submitted it. Ordinarily, we would have brought it to you for sign-off. We submitted it with wide consultation, as best we could do in very trying circumstances, and I commend it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any comments or questions? Oh, somebody's back. Councillor Whittington.
Thanks. Yeah, just to back up some of the bits and pieces that David has said. It was very much a case of leading questions, and we made sure we didn't go with the leading questions as much as possible, because it didn't really reflect the situation that we've got in Portsmouth. And I think I said to David when we discussed this, we had a draft with Linda, and I had a chat with David, and I said, even if it's the adage of, if someone's going to do something stupid, you may as well still tell them they're doing something stupid, because then at least they've been told, and they can't say that you didn't tell them otherwise. And in the end, we put across the fact that all the work we're doing in Portsmouth, that is for the best interest of Portsmouth, and we hope that at least some of it will continue to stick. But we are at the mercy of forces that are national, that are top down, and in the end, we can only push back as much as we can push back. So I think we've put an extremely good case together, and in the meantime, I think that the onus on all of us in all the organisations in the city is to continue to work together as closely as we possibly can, because the more that we intertwine ourselves together now, the more difficult it will be to unpick afterwards. So I think that's really a message back. At the same time, working together with our partners at Hampshire Isle of Wight level is really important. We have got a lot of commonality and common ground there, and we have a lot of allies as well. I think there's a lot of people who really do think that place-based in local authority level and even lower than that is the right way to go. So if we keep making sure that voice is heard in Hampshire Isle of Wight via Portsmouth, then we are in a much better place. But yeah, again, thanks for everyone who got involved in that submission and really showing the good I'll keep saying it, the good collaborative working that we have in the city. Absolutely, David. Yeah, thank you so much, Kelly, for coordinating that response, because it's not an easy task when you dealing with things like this, and we have made our case very clearly because of the submissions we've had, but also the way that that's been put together. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Jackie.
Probably just to echo all of that completely and utterly from an NHS point of view as well. And I've spoken to fellow lays kind of across the patch, and there's a definite sense that there is a place for that wider footprint, and there is also an importance about having flexibility. And what I don't want for us to happen is to just sleepwalk into a system that doesn't work for Portsmouth, or actually doesn't work across the patch. So taking the time to give a comprehensive answer and to state our case and to show the really good collaborative work felt really important. Even if it's not the most exciting read, it is definitely we need this. We need this. It'd probably be one of the most important things we do, just to be able to speak up on what we've achieved and how we're willing to work across the system where it feels appropriate and play our part. That's it.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? So that's for noting. Obviously, as things progress, we will give updates to the Health and Wellbeing Board. So item agenda 6, the send. Is it Julia that's doing this one, or Alison, are you leading off?
Yes, it's me, Julia Catherine.
Julia, lovely, thank you, Julia.
So this is my annual update for the Health and Wellbeing Board on the SEND strategy in Portsmouth. I came February last year, and what a lot has happened since then. So this, just to highlight a few things really, it's for the board to note and approve the updated SEND strategy, to update you on the progress we've made since the inspection, to continue to seek endorsement of our inclusion agenda, and to also seek endorsement of the SEND accommodation strategy. So I'll just summarise that really briefly, and then happy to take any questions. So as you know, the SEND strategy continues to be a priority for the Children's Trust, and I provide an annual update for this board. And the strategy is about improving outcomes for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities and their families. Appendix 1 at the end of the report includes the full strategy document, and there are 2 updates from when you've seen that previously. So every year I update under each of the work streams the actions that have been achieved over the last 12 months. So the work streams themselves haven't changed, they continue to be the priorities, but we have an annual delivery plan that we refresh every year, and I update the strategy with the actions that we've achieved. The second change to the document, the second thing that I've added, is a table to explain the progress that's been made following the SEND inspection. So the actual inspection took place in July 2019. We received the report in September 2019, and we were one of the minority of local areas, in fact, to not be required to publish a written statement of action. So actually lots and lots of good practice recognised in terms of our practice and progress across the city. The second appendix summarises the areas that the report did highlight and the progress we've made against each of those. So you'll see that there's been progress made across most of those areas, and there are plans in place where there is still issues to be resolved. As I say, happy to take any questions on that at the end. The other thing that I wanted to update the board on is our SEND and alternative provision accommodation strategy. So again, quite a detailed piece of work that we've carried out over the last year, looking at the way that we forecast future need for specialist educational provision for children with special needs and disabilities. And what that highlighted is that we needed to change our methodology for forecasting because it's actually a very complex picture. It's not just about the child or young person's needs, but it also takes into consideration, for example, the inclusion agenda. So if parents want their child to be educated in mainstream schools, they have that right within the law, and also parents have the ability to express a preference for a particular school. So it's difficult to forecast. It's a very complex picture. And as we've updated our methodology, we've identified that there's a real growth in the numbers of children coming through with autism and with complex learning needs. And therefore, we needed to create additional specialist educational provision to ensure that we can meet those needs going forward. So the final section of the report just outlines our 5-year plan for making sure that we have sufficient specialist places. Some of those will be created in our special schools. Some of those will be created in inclusion centres and alternative provision in our mainstream schools, because we want it to be consistent with our ambition to become an even more inclusive city. And obviously the progress on that is subject to additional capital funding. There's some capital funding already identified, but obviously the 5-year plan will be subject to that funding being agreed. And the final thing to mention is that within that capital bid, we also put forward the inclusion grant for mainstream schools that we would like to become an annual opportunity to enhance the physical accommodation in mainstream schools to enable schools to meet the increasingly wide range of needs of children coming through the system.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was a very comprehensive report, and a lot has been done in this sort of area for the offer. I wanted to highlight, though, on page 54, the reds that are within the response to the local SEND inspection. Now they seem to be quite major reds, but how are we going to improve them, bearing in mind my sort of standard question about COVID, because they're all going to be affected by COVID as well. So could you just give me an update on how you're going to do that?
Absolutely. Shall I just briefly talk through the reds in that table so that, you've got a bit more detail on that? Yes, absolutely. So I think the first red is the annual GP health checks, and that's about as are some of these, there's a data issue. So in terms of being able to collect the data that we need, and obviously SEND works right across education, health and care, and all of the recording happens on different systems. So to be able to capture that information that's recorded on different systems and have that reported in a way that is enables us to monitor progress in that area is proving quite challenging. Yeah, that as I say, that's primarily a data issue. The second area, looking at the health pathway for looked after children, well, there is currently work underway on redesigning that pathway and making sure that there's again, a much more integrated approach, and that we're able to capture all of that data, which again sits in different places. So again, I think some of the issues are around the data rather than the work not being done. Let me just scroll down a second. So the next red is around CAMS. This was around re-referrals. So we've developed a new scorecard to look at performance indicators for SEMH, so social, emotional and mental health services that support children with social, emotional and mental health needs. And this was around being able to, so not the overall waiting times, but when there was a reoccurrence of a problem and families needed to be re-referred back in, making sure that we were able to report accurately on those waiting times for re-referrals. The next one is there is currently again a data issue. There's currently no way of capturing the information just for this age group, because obviously the SEND strategy is up to the age of 25 in terms of young people with learning disabilities in independent living. So we've got the data for the whole age group, but obviously this group of up to 25-year-olds will be quite a small percentage of that overall group. So we don't currently have a solution to that. We don't currently have a way of just capturing, and that is something that's been delayed by COVID, because we were starting to have conversations about that a year ago, and that's not been able to progress. And then I think the last area is about the protocol. Yes, the last area is the protocol. So we do have a protocol for transition, which is published. And what we need to do is make sure that that now covers the full range of transition to the full range of adult services. So obviously we've concentrated on young people to learning disability services. So in summary, there are a number of issues that are around data recording that have proved more challenging to resolve than it might seem. There are a couple of issues that have been delayed due to COVID and people being redeployed to other tasks. And for most areas, there's a plan in place of how to address those.
Councillor Horton.
Thank you. Just two things I wanted to make a comment. One was the accommodation review, and just really my thanks to everyone who's put such a huge amount of work into that. And I'm actually very optimistic around the philosophical change around inclusion that we can push with that, whilst obviously focusing on the needs of all children. Comment was made the other day in another meeting about what's going to happen when the population starts declining. Suddenly are we going to have all this spare space? And I think the answer is safely no, because whilst the population may be declining, we've known for a long period of time that demand for special educational needs support and places has gone up. So hopefully we'll meet at a affordable level in the middle. So that was my first point. The second point was around a little bit in response to what Councillor Smith raised, and I know Julia's given really direct answers to those areas of red, but on a general level around the impact of COVID, whilst obviously there are lots of things to be concerned about, there are a few silver linings around this, and one of them is around the relationship and the working between schools and other areas around these most vulnerable children. And whilst we could do some data collection on this and reports on it, anecdotally, there's constant positive feedback from schools and from families about these close working relationships. So I think we need to be to take advantage of that as we come out of COVID, to make sure that those close levels of communication and relationships are maintained. Of course, we've done that already by continuing the link coordinators that were stood up during the first lockdown and made a smaller number of them permanent moving forward. And I think we just need to keep aware of that as we come out, as we have this recovery kind of set of relationships moving forward. So 2 points I just wanted to highlight.
Thank you. Alison.
Oh, just briefly, I think the data issues relate particularly to adult services and Solent, both of whom, of course, are very taken up with the COVID crisis at the moment. I think once we're through the pandemic, we really need to make sure that we have the opportunity to drill down and try and solve some of these data sharing issues.
Yeah. Thank you.